Welcome to TankSpot's Tanking Reference. My name's Ciderhelm. I'm the administrator of TankSpot.com. This movie is part of a series that covers general tanking theory and other practical information. In this particular movie, I'm going to begin by covering very basic positioning theory, and after this, I'm going to get into different methods of movement, and we'll be covering some very advanced mechanics many players are not aware of. If you're watching this on YouTube, please be sure to check the companion links in the movie information box. I want to start with basic positioning for different roles in each party or raid. In this clip of Violet Hold, I've used raid icons to clearly show differences in location based on whether a player is tanking, melee DPS, or a ranged DPS or healer. DPSers who use melee attacks while in front of the enemy often have to deal with a higher chance to be parried. This not only decreases their damage, but it can also increase the damage the tank is taking. In addition, some classes have attacks that can only be used from behind an enemy. In most cases, ranged and healers want to be as far away from potential enemies as the encounter permits. This gives additional travel time if an enemy chooses to attack these players, and this can be a very real way of reducing incoming party and raid damage. Many enemies have conal abilities. For instance, mature dragons often have both a frontal breath and a rear tail attack of some sort. It's important to understand that players can be technically in the front or back of these mobs without being in danger of being hit by these cones. In these cases, being in back without being in danger will often look like being to the side near the rear legs. One of the earliest lessons tanks learn is that breaking line of sight, or LOS, can force casters to come into melee range. There are a variety of other uses for LOS, such as forcing packs of enemies to funnel through a choke point where they can easily be hit by party or raid AoE. There are some encounters built around the use of LOS. One of two encounters in Blackwing Lair that relied on the use of LOS was Firemoth. In this encounter, I am personally in LOS of Firemon and subject to all of his outgoing damage, including a stacking fire damage debuff. However, my healers are using a nearby doorway to stay in LOS of me and heal me while staying out of LOS of Firemon and not taking damage from his AoE. LOS with your party or raid healers is often important to keep in mind. Some stairways, especially stairways with short, flat sections, can be problematic for healers. If you're with unattentive healers, or you're short on gear as a tank, it's best to pay close attention to where you're standing. However, if you trust your healer and can survive a few seconds, it's helpful to break LOS in some groups to force DPS to move forward through an instance. Location requirements will vary greatly with each encounter, but the principles and theory of positioning are very basic. I don't want to spend more time covering it because the process of moving to new positions is far more important knowledge to effective tanking. The first form of movement I want to talk about is advancing, or moving forward. Enemies, even raid bosses, can be forced to back up if you move forward on them in a precise way. This is helpful if you need to change your positioning slightly without putting the party or raid in danger. To do this, you should advance until your targeting circle overlaps the central point of the enemy targeting circle. In this clip, you can see me forcing an enemy with a larger targeting circle to move backwards. The enemy will always move in the most direct path away from you. However, you must be careful when you are unable to accurately guess at the central point of the enemy targeting circle, since a step too far will cause the enemy to fully turn around and then move in the opposite direction of where you were intending. Jumping is a valuable tool that many players overlook. It allows forward momentum independent of which way your character is facing. In this clip, you'll see how this can be useful for turning an enemy around to the other side. While there are many uses for this throughout raiding, there have been a handful of encounters where this type of movement is very helpful. In this brief clip of Lethon, I'm switching sides every 4 Shadow Bolt volley as they go clockwise around his body. This keeps the raid from ever having to deal with the volley. Jumping also opens up options with instant attacks. I've most often used this as a means of escape by coupling a stun with a quick mid-jump turnaround. In this clip, watch carefully as I jump, turn around, shockwave, turn around again, and then I'm ready to move forward in my original direction the moment I touch the ground. Unless incoming damage is trivial, you don't want to turn your back on an enemy. This is partly because you cannot take advantage of your avoidance or block and will take more damage on average as a result. It's also because you cannot use most targeted attacks unless you are facing your enemy. However, there are two primary methods of moving away from or repositioning enemies that don't take avoidance and block out of play and allow you to continue using your abilities. These are backing up and strafing. In the great majority of situations, effective strafing is superior to backing up. This is primarily because strafing allows you to move at full speed rather than the slower rate that backing up does. Secondarily, strafing elicits a higher responsiveness from the server than backing up does, which I'll get into momentarily. Backing up does have its advantages over strafing in limited situations. In a situation where movement does not need to be quick or where slower movement helps time the encounter better, such as Grobulus, backing up is often superior. In these situations, it can allow your melee DPS players in the party or raid to move in a more predictable and stable way. It can also allow for more consistent positioning results than strafing. AoE tanking presents situations where backing up has limited advantages over strafing, though both can be used effectively. In this clip, watch a group of enemies as they've shifted around me. This spreading out is natural for the great majority of enemies in this game when a group of them is targeting a single player. When I use Shockwave, a conal ability, after they've spread out, it doesn't hit the targets on the left or right. However, by taking a quick, small step back, I can hit all of the targets in front of me. Depending on the size of the hitbox, a quick step to the left or right while strafing can have the exact same result of making mobs easier to hit with conal abilities. Interestingly, the first group of enemies I filmed were also the first enemies I've noticed in Warcraft that did not automatically shift around me. These were in Sholazar and are part of an extensive vehicle encounter. AoE groups tend to be more deliberate and predictable when you move backwards. However, when starting the pull, strafing is often better because it allows you to gather more enemies sooner. Generally, I will strafe around a group of enemies, often mounted, to gather them up. Then I'll position them by backing up. I mentioned earlier that strafing elicits a higher responsiveness from the server. To be clear, the server responds to strafing in a much different way than it does with either backing up or moving forward. When strafing, enemies will act predictively rather than reactively. In other words, enemies will attempt to predict where you're intending to go and base their movements off that, which will cause them to move quicker with you. One example of where this is beneficial is with Gluth. If I were to walk backwards bringing Gluth to the outer door of his room, he would move with me. If I walk backwards though, he'll usually stay a good distance away from the door once we're parked. However, since part of my role is making sure he's as far away from zombie chows as possible, I want him tight on that door. I've chosen Gluth to illustrate this because the door behind him is not a solid object. Although I can't pass through this door until it opens, the server does not make Gluth aware of this restriction. In this clip, watch as I easily move Gluth to a position where he is tight on the door. He moves this far because he has predicted I would move past the door. When the central point of his body is touching the door, I take a quick step to the side to force him to move even further back. In this situation, it's not practical to move him through the door. In fact, it's pretty much never been helpful to killing a raid boss. However, there are a limited number of situations where understanding this can allow you to reset encounters. In this clip, watch as I pull the 4 horsemen by myself and subsequently reset the encounter. If you've enjoyed this or you've learned from it, please consider making a donation to TankSpot.com. As always, donors can download this and other high-definition movies directly from our site. If you're watching this on YouTube and have any questions regarding this movie or regarding the download, please check the movie links in the information box. Thank you.